Welcome to Lawsuits and Lessons. This is episode 1, and I want to introduce you to our host. I'm Steve Cooper, but our host is a man who I met at a bar in Burbank around 15 years ago. It's the one, the only. It's John Fagerholm. How you doing, John?
I'm well, thanks, Steve. I have fond memories of Burbank. What was that place called? Volcanoes? That was our spot, right?
Yeah, it was called Volcano. It's funny. I still remember meeting you. I think you were wearing a Lakers jersey, and I was watching. I was watching basketball with a friend of mine, Will Tejada, and we started talking to you, and you found out I was from the Philly area, and you brought up Caldwell Jones. Now, I've been to bars all over this country. I've talked to people all over this country, and I have never heard someone bring up a Caldwell Jones reference before.
Well, I'm a basketball head, so especially the 80s, 90s. So that's how I knew Caldwell Jones of all people.
Funny thing is, though, I've known you for 15 years, and I really don't know how you got your start in law. What was your whole process to becoming a lawyer, which is the basis of the show, your law practice and what you do. But what was your path to becoming a lawyer?
Well, I got sued a lot. When I got out of the Navy as a 21-year-old firebrand, all I wanted was my own business. So I started a couple businesses, well, a few businesses. Uh, and it seemed like each time it would go well, and then suddenly something would happen. And then I'd have to hire a lawyer, pay all this money to a lawyer, and then start over again. And that at some point, I think after the third lawsuit, I was like, wait a minute, I could just be a lawyer and then own my own business. So that's what's triggered it. That's what started it.
So how did you pick your law school? And then you were older. And how old were you when you started going to law school?
I was just 29, I think. So I was about 4 years behind everybody else, but that's about right. I mean, I was in the Navy for roughly that amount of time. So by the time I started college, everyone I went to high school with was just had just graduated the year before. So
So when you go into law school, what do you decide? What do you decide? Does someone who's going to law school decide what law they're going to practice when they're in law school? Or how was your path to what you do now? Because I knew you when I knew you, and we'll get into it. You did entertainment law and what you're doing now. But how did you decide? I mean, when did you decide what law you're going to practice?
well, I was living in Seattle, and I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer like everybody else that moves to LA to go to law school. They all want to be entertainment lawyers. And so that's what I did. I wanted to be in film, but it turned out music was a little bit easier to get into. So I really didn't have much of a film career other than soundtracks. I did a lot of soundtracks, but I had a pretty robust gangster rap portfolio that I handled.
So you start that now. When do you go out and start your own firm?
Right away. That was always the dream, was to have my own business. So right there in downtown Burbank, right out of my bedroom. That was day one of the law firm.
Now, what did you bring to the table? Because I mean, you're starting, it's funny, everyone now is an entrepreneur. You see, everyone's an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. We hear that term so much. I mean, you go on LinkedIn, everyone's an entrepreneur. I mean, my paper boy's a solopreneur. I mean, everyone's doing this stuff. So how does one go about starting a law firm? Because, people who watch this who are possibly law students, they're getting out. And a lot of times people take the route to become a partner or they go this way. It's because you have student debt, a lot of them times picked up. How did you go about starting your firm? Because it must be sort of scary because you don't have any clients. No one knows your name. I mean, so what was your path to your success?
Yeah, and you don't know anything. That's the other thing, right? Ignorance, stupidity, bravado. I mean, I don't know what you want to call it, but just a insane belief in myself, and it's what I wanted to do, so it didn't matter. Lived on credit cards until I figured it out. 3 months after practicing, I was making about 10K a month, and that's more money than I'd ever made in my life. And so, it didn't take long to get it going. There just seems to be a lot of work in LA, or at least at that time there was. Yeah, and so that's how it happened. I found success pretty early, and then never looked back.
Now, how do you find clients? I mean, now you're established, but when you begin, and especially like you said, LA, everyone has something going on in LA. There's half the people are full of crap, you know that, and some of them are legit. And you go to events, people go, I'm a lawyer, or I'm this, I'm an agent. How do you start finding clients? Because you said you started off very quickly and you got clients. How do you find clients? And do you remember your first client?
Yes, my first client was Curtis Blow, believe it or not.
I love Curtis Blow.
Caught him on when he was not doing so well and most of his money was made overseas. But yeah, that was my first client. And, the way I got clients was just being out there. And there was a guy at Roscoe's that used to be at the front door. His name was Papa Cap, Jimmy. at Roscoe's. I don't know if you even remember this because this is the late 90s, early 2000s, but he really took a liking to me, and I lived right around the corner from Roscoe's at the time, and he just introduced me to everybody. Because at that time, Roscoe's was the hot spot, and all the celebrities went in there, and that's where I met Curtis Blow as an introduction from Jimmy. I have no idea what happened to him or where he is, but he's the guy that got me started.
Roscoe's was great, man. The chicken and waffles. And I used to love on Sundays because you'd see all the African American families come after church. And the women were usually heavier set, but they'd be dressed to the nines. And you'd be like, where do you find a bright purple hat? Bright, I mean, they all look phenomenal. You drive by it was amazing. It was a great place. And it is, honestly, it is a Hollywood legend. Is it still open, you know?
It's still open. When's the last time I went there? It's been a while. It was pre-COVID the last time I went there, but I just drove by there not that long ago, and it looked like it was still open. But it completely changed from that golden era of Roscoe's, I guess I'd call it, because it used to be this small little tiny place, and people that had worked there forever, and you knew their names, and it was almost like a mom and pop spot, even though it was owned by a guy named Herb. And funny enough, I ended up doing his trademarks at some point too. So it all just changed. There were a lot of firings, they expanded it. And so it's just not quite what it was, but the food is still the same.
Now, you mentioned Curtis Blow was your first client, and you mentioned, his entertainment law. So how would you, to someone who doesn't know law, like someone like me, I mean, I know agents and managers, I don't know about lawyers that much. What would you explain that an entertainment lawyer does? What is on your plate? Like if you have a syllabus, what are some of the things you do?
Most importantly for entertainment law, and by the way, that's not what I do anymore, but most entertainment law lawyers are just doing deals, and most of the deals come from the agents or whoever else. But I think what made me valuable is that I was motivated. So I really hustled, and I would actually find deals for my clients. And they were, a bit of everything. Almost everything was paperwork, and I had a really great partner that loved the paperwork, whereas I liked the actual deals, negotiating the deal and finding the deal, and he liked papering it, so it worked out really well.
So you did that for a while. So now, when did you make the transition to what you're doing now? And explain to people who are watching what kind of law you practice, because it's very important. Because that's one of the basis of the show. So you better tell them what you do.
I mean, I've always been a litigator from day one. That was also something I wanted to do because I got sued so much, in my previous life that I saw how it works, and I wanted to be one of those guys that's in that space. So I've always litigated, and in fact, I've litigated for lots of my entertainment clients too. And at some point, the music industry just changed, and the deals were different. The money was a lot less. Everything was corporatized, I guess you would call it. And then I also started, losing interest in the type of clients that I had. I had my great clients, and some of them I still even represent. Even though I'm not really doing entertainment law anymore, I still do things for them. Some I'm still even very good friends with, even though I don't do work for them. But it just got to a point when the money started drying up that I realized in the space that I was in, which was gangster rap, I wasn't really a necessity. I was more of an accessory. So as soon as trouble happened, I was the first one not to get paid, and so I thought, this isn't for me. Let me start litigating. Did a little research, figured out that about 70% of the lawsuits in LA County anyway are employees suing employers. So I thought, what a great place to start. And because I'm an entrepreneur, I only wanted to represent business owners and entrepreneurs, not the employee side, when in actuality, that's where the real big money is on the employee side. But on the employer side, all the rules are stacked against the business owners in California. And I rail about this all the time. It's just a good fight. And I really enjoy what I do. And I really enjoy representing businesses. And I think that it's changed how I think about the economy and business. And it's made me come to believe that business owners are what drives everything. And that's the problem with California is that they focus all their energies on making it easy for the employees to sue the employer, when in actuality, if they wanted a good economy, they should be focusing on helping the business owner expand their business and give them the freedom to create so that they can hire more people. So those are my thoughts.
How do they make it easier? Because you said there's a lot of cases, and you're right. You don't see, I network a lot. I never hear about lawsuits or anything like that. So how do they make it easy? How does California make it easy for the employee to sue the employer? And the funny thing about that is a lot of times, people have this, people only read the stuff that they read. Half the stuff's signed. So they write, and everyone always thinks as soon as you see a lawsuit, they think the employer is the bad person. They always have that. They have that they're scorning the little man. Even though the person could be out in the back as a waiter smoking cigarettes and spitting in drinks, no one gives a crap. There people will say, oh, well, yeah, but he didn't get the right break time. So why does California make it easy for, let's say I work for a company and the company I met you. Let's say I still work for Granville. I wanted to sue them. I mean, why is it easy for me to bring a lawsuit against a business in California?
There's two main categories. Category one is wage and hour claims, right? And that's pretty much math. And then on the other side, there's FIHA claims, which are like sexual harassment, discrimination, and things like that. Continuously, California keeps adding to the burden, making it harder to comply with stuff on the wage and hour stuff, right? And it doesn't take much to sue your employer. And then on the FIHA stuff, it's set up so that the employer takes all the risk. The employer has to justify why they did or didn't do something. And it's very easy to say, hey, it was discrimination. Hey, it was whatever it is. And I get these calls all day long, right? Hey, I got a letter from this lawyer. I just had one today. Hey, it's a Korean owned company and a letter from a lawyer, uh, you discriminated against this girl because she's Persian. And well, we have 10 other Persians that work here, number one. And number two, here's all the write-ups and everything else, right? But they only need one thing. So that's the FIHA side of it. And then on the FIHA side, they say, okay, this is worth $200,000 or whatever they're going to say because you discriminated. But then on this side, it's like, oh, and there's a clerical error on her paycheck, right? In order to sue, they really just need the clerical error, right? And they'll add the FIHA claim in the lawsuit, and they'll say they want $200,000, and then the employer is incentivized to settle. Okay, well, let me just give you $50,000 because this is going to cost me $200,000 to fight it. If I decide that I'm not going to take this lying down and I can prove my case because I have all of these documents. All right, well, that's 200,000 in legal fees over the next 3 years and through trial. Well, the problem with that is it's not just a $200,000 problem because the way the law is written, if they win any amount of money for most of the cause of action, not all of them, but for most of them, you also have to pay the attorney's fees on the other side. So assume a jury says, hey, this is a $5,000 issue. Well, we'll give you $5,000. All right, well, they've already paid me $200,000 over 3 years to defend themselves. They have that $5,000 award. And now on top of that, it's going to be another 200,000 plus legal fees on the other side because the other side won something. So it's set up in a way where you just settle even if you haven't done anything wrong because it's too expensive. And even arbitration these days is almost useless to a point because people arbitrate because they don't want nuclear judgments. And the nuclear judgments come from a bad fact pattern. Hey, the supervisor was sexually harassing this employee. Now, of course, the employer is responsible for that. He's responsible for protecting their employees, not only from other employees, but even the guy delivering packages. You could get sued for that, right? So that's how broad it is. A lot of companies want arbitration agreements in order to avoid those nuclear judgments because arbitration is just with a judge. The problem is, arbitration fees are upwards of $200,000 now. Somewhere between 100 to 200,000, depending on the arbitrator, and that's the employer that has to pay that. So you have a case that's worth $50,000, let's say, valued at $50,000. Well, the opposing counsel is not going to settle for $50,000, even though that's the value. He's going to say, give me 200 because I know that's what the arbitration fees are.
It gets insanely with the prices. It gets so high. Now, for you, and then for the industry standard, what is your win? I mean, do you say it's a win? I mean, do you go into the case and you win for the employer where you get the judgment? What is your percentage, and then what is the industry percentage? Because you're in California, you're also in Texas. When do employers win a lot of these cases, or is California giving a lot of these cases to the employee?
Well, that's the problem, right? If you have a jury, it's not going to be a jury full of CEOs and business owners. It's going to be a jury full of employees, right? And everyone's had a bad boss. Everyone's had a bad employer, right? And so they're already tainted with that. So if you're at a jury, you better believe that you can win this case. If you're at the jury stage, because the jury is not going to come in there rooting for you as the business owner. A win for us is getting rid of it as quickly as possible for as little money as possible. That's a win, right? And that's very vague because in law terms, quick is 8 months, a year, right? Inexpensive is anywhere under six figures, right? Depending on what the case is, right? So in law, it's not enough to be right. You can't just be right. You have to be right and right, meaning that you have to be right in your position. Hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I have the evidence, right? And then you have to be right in the outcome. Okay, if the outcome is that you spent $200,000 or more going through trial just to prove you didn't do anything wrong, and you took the risk, that's not a smart business owner is even if they're correct and they didn't do anything wrong, is probably not going to take that option. It's too risky.
You said you were a good litigator. What makes a good litigator in your eyes? Because there's probably some people who are book smart. It's like in life. There's some people who have, like my sister's book smart, but she has no common sense. My brother is not book smart, but has all the common sense in the world. For you, what do you think makes you a good litigator?
I think it's the attention to detail. I think that's really important. When you have a case, it's easy just to listen to what the client told you and look at the paperwork that comes across your desk and go, okay, this is what it is. I think a lot of lawyers get so busy they don't actually think about the case. And because I'm an entrepreneur myself, besides my law firm, I've had you know many other businesses, including businesses today that are outside of law. So for me, I'm actually interested. I'm interested in their business, how it works, why there's this opportunity to sue them. Okay, we have a factory and we have 100 people that work there. We're being sued on a pay stub violation because these people say that they have to wait in line to punch out, and now they've worked overtime for 8 minutes while they're waiting in line, or whatever the situation is. So I want to understand all that. Like, why is this run this way? How can we change it? Besides plugging the holes, I think it gives you a better idea of how to defend this and whether you should even be defending this. Because sometimes you just have to go, hey, we're not going to win this, or this is going to cost way too much money. Here's what I think we should be doing. The other thing that I think makes me slightly different, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I've dealt with enough insurance counsel, where they're defending the business owner, but they're the insurance company, to know that people aren't thinking creatively about this. You can't just make it easy for people to sue you and go through a lawsuit, because then there's no incentive for them to get rid of it. You have to make it painful for them also. And so I think we're pretty creative about how to make it painful for opposing counsel also. All cases are different, but there's the best case scenario for the other side is as much money as they can get as quickly as they can get it, right? So of course, then I have to go the other way. I have to make it very painful and really grind it out with them, and that helps with the settlement. I don't know other defense firms that countersue the employee. I mean, it just seems like common sense to me, and I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a stolen laptop. I don't care if it's untrue comment on Facebook. Let's countersue, because they have to feel the pressure too. And if they don't feel the pressure, they're just going to ask for whatever they want and make it go as long as they want. And, the client's going to spend a lot of money.
You make a good point about social media because you always see those idiots who are sitting there going, "Oh, oh my boss is an ass." Oh, and they type all this stuff and they put it out there. I said, people, don't air your personal grievance. I had a guy who was arguing with his wife. I said, don't put that stuff up. He's like, "Oh, she's awful. She sucked all the energy out of me." I'm like, dude, do not put that up there, because if you happen to get divorced, they're gonna go, "Hey, look what he said." So do you run into that? Like, do you have someone go into people's Facebook? Let's say someone's suing an employee for a big amount of money, and it's a restaurant per se. They go, "Oh yeah, the food sucks. The boss did this, did this, did this, this." Do people look into that, and is that admissible in court? Can you say this is what they put on Facebook, so they have already a predisposed attitude towards their boss?
Whether they have a predisposed attitude toward their boss or not really doesn't make much of a difference. The real question is, did you do whatever they claim, right? But the reason why we look into it for a countersuit And defamation is very specific, and it seems to be the one that they tend to like to do because people think that social media is just one of these things you can that have no consequences because you're behind a keyboard or whatever. First of all, for defamation, truth is an absolute defense, and opinion is a defense. So if I say my boss is an asshole, that's my opinion. That isn't really defamation. Or if I say they don't serve Chinese people here, and it turns out to be true, that's an absolute defense, right? But that's not usually what happens. What usually happens is they go in and they put in a fake Yelp review and to try to damage the business. See, that's defamation right there. So that's easy. So now what happens is one of the things that opposing counsel counts on is that they get paid their legal fees on the other side, but that's for the complaint. That's for the labor violation, right? They don't get paid for the countersuit that I'm filing against their client for defamation. So now the opposing counsel has two choices. Choice number one is to not handle the countersuit because he's not required to. And if he doesn't handle the countersuit, then the employee's got to find another attorney, have the attorney pay for it, whatever else, or may even take a default judgment, which is usually what happens. And that's what I love. When they take a default judgment, then within 6 months, I'm collecting against that default judgment while this lawsuit's going on. So I have a lot of leverage. The other thing that happens is the lawyer decides to answer the cross complaint, but they're usually not getting paid for that. So now they're taking on a burden and spending money and spending time that they're never going to get paid back for. Well, that gives them an incentive to resolve the claim, the underlying claim much earlier. So that's why we like to do that.
You mentioned earlier one of the reasons you're a good litigator is because your attention to detail. Now, do you think that some of that attention to detail comes from your military background? Because everyone says, the Navy. You're in the Navy. I mean, you have to keep everything nice and clean and detailed. I mean, do you think has that played a part? You think with your concentration and your attention to detail? Because a lot of people they don't pay attention to detail. They just, I mean, look, you have your pocket square matches, your whole outfit. Like if I wear a pocket square, I wear a different one, and because I don't have a bunch of them. But you have that detail going. Does that come from your Navy? Does that come from your childhood? Or where does that come from? Because a lot of people don't have it, and I think it's a born. I think you're born with it. I think you're born to have attention to detail. I mean, you can think you love it, but it's like people who try to be hip. Some people just aren't hip. They can think they're hip, but they walk in, they can buy a nice suit and everything, and they still look like a dickhead. I mean, it's just given. So is the detail come from the Navy part or the military part?
I don't think so. And I really enjoyed my time in the Navy, but I can't say that I learned that much or got that much out of the Navy other than traveling the world, number one, which is amazing on Uncle Sam's dime. And number two, knowing that I didn't want to work for anyone. Being in the Navy and, being told what to do by every dum dum that wasn't smart enough to get out of the Navy, made me say, okay, I don't want to work for anyone. So I don't think it's that. What I think it is, and by the way, I don't have attention to detail on everything, right? I can remember facts of a case and then forget my wife's birthday. It's because I really enjoy stories, right? And so I always remember facts, even the tiny little things that you would think aren't important. I always remember because I'm just really interested in the story. Like, okay, tell me what happened. How does your business run? What does your business do? All of this stuff really, really interests me. And I think it comes to play when you start litigating because there's only two things in litigation. It's the facts and the evidence. Really isn't anything else, right? Okay, what are the facts? What are the facts we're claiming? What are the facts they're claiming? What are the undisputable facts, right? And then what does the evidence say? And how can you apply the evidence to the facts, right? That's it. So because I enjoy the story, I think I remember facts from somebody can call me and say, hey, we talked 2 years ago, and they start talking. I'm like, oh wait, you're the guy with the that sells bags of rice, outside of in downtown LA or whatever the situation is. And it's just the story that makes me interested in actually paying attention.
So the people are getting to know you, and in the upcoming weeks, you're going to be interviewing a lot of your friends who are entrepreneurs, and that's something that you know a lot of entrepreneurs. You'll be getting insight from the mind of an entrepreneur. That being said, what do you think makes for a good entrepreneur? because you're an entrepreneur and you said as you have the law, and I've known you, and you've shifted. As they say, pivot, which I hate the word pivot. Oh, we pivoted. It's like, yeah, and there's so many words you see in link business. It's like when people say rock star, which I hate because it's like, no, I know rock stars. I party with rock stars. You aren't a rock star. You sell freaking copiers, okay? Copiers, and these guys are trashing hotel rooms. You're going to a chamber of commerce buffet, okay? You're not a rock star in your eyes, and your friends who are going to come on, because so many people. And I met him. People, if you don't know, years ago, John and I also hosted a show with an actor named Sheldon Anderson, who called Living in the Law. And John brought some amazing entrepreneurs in, like Bobby Razak and other people, and just the Jack one married to the Jackson. And what do you think makes a good entrepreneur? Because people are going to know, for the upcoming weeks, they're going to want to see interesting people, and you have great friends and you had this connection with them. What makes a good entrepreneur to you?
Part of me thinks that you're born with it, and then part of me thinks that there's just an attitude of I want to be the boss, or I want to create something new. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are successful, but they're traditionally not good business people in the sense of, they watch the books or they are good salespeople or whatever else. So I'm not quite sure. Right after 9/11 happened, even though I had started my own law firm out of my bedroom, but about 8 months in, to my own law firm, 9/11 happened, and I panicked a little bit. And I thought, oh man, the world is ending. I better get a job, right? So I worked for a little under a year for another law firm. And that's when I realized, because I got along with everybody except the owner of the firm. We bumped heads all the time, right? And in hindsight, he was probably correct. It's his. What was I? I should have just been following orders and playing along, doing what he was doing. But I just realized that I'm just not that guy. I'm not that guy that wants you to talk to me any way that you want to talk to me. I'm not the guy that wants to just live on the paycheck that you're giving. It just wasn't in me. And we had this big shouting match, and he fired me, right? And it was like a Friday, and he fired me. And I'm driving home to my wife and my two young kids, um, thinking, okay, how am I going to tell them that I got fired? But in reality, a big weight had lifted off my shoulders. I was like, man, this is the best thing that could have happened to me, because I could have almost gotten stuck in this situation, right? Where I'm commuting, an hour each way, and just the stuff that I don't want my life to be. And what's funny is, as I was sitting there driving and listening to music and just feeling good that I got fired, which is an odd feeling, I thought of Aesop's fables. And when I was living in Germany as a kid, we learned Aesop's fables, not Mother Goose, right? Like they do in America. And one of the fables was the dog and the man. Why can't I remember this now? Oh, the dog and the wolf, right? And basically the way I remembered it, and I went back and read it later, and it's not exactly the way I remembered it or the way that I tell it now, but the way I remembered it when I was driving, that there's a dog chained to the side of a house and a wolf comes out of the woods. And they start getting into this discussion about whose life is better, right? So the dog says, hey, I may have this heavy collar around my neck, but I get 3 meals a day. And the wolf says, okay, well, maybe I don't eat every day, but I can howl at the moon whenever I want. And I'm not even sure why I remember that fable. I mean, that was 30 years from when I last heard it. But I was like, yeah, I'm the wolf. I'm not the dog. And there's no problem with being the dog. There's some people that need that steady paycheck. I don't need that. I want the freedom of howling at the moon whenever I want to howl at the moon. I believe that that's at least a significant part of most entrepreneurs.
Okay, see, because I'm screwed that because I don't remember the limericks like the once the man from Nantucket. So I'm not like that. Now, can an entrepreneur, and this is just because a lot of them, can an entrepreneur still be considered a successful entrepreneur if he's not making shit tons of money?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what he's doing. You know what I mean? I mean, some entrepreneurs are just trying to invent things or trying to create things. I mean, how long did it take Jeff Bezos to make money? And in fact, I think that Amazon still doesn't even make money, but he's one of the wealthiest men in the world. So I don't know. And he's a clear cut entrepreneur, but I think he's also good at business. I think he's one of the special ones, right? And I'm not saying I care that much about Jeff Bezos. I don't know that much about him. But I do have a good story. He did buy me dinner once. I'll tell you that story maybe on another episode. But this is a guy that was working in hedge funds, I think the story is, and then said, okay, this internet thing is pretty cool. How do I make money on the internet? And then just worked his way backwards from there. Right. So he's obviously an entrepreneur and he's obviously a good business person. So those are the elites of the elites. Right. And I know a lot of them too, not the Jeff Bezos of the world, but a lot of people that are the elite entrepreneurs, which means that they are creative, but they're also good at business. Um, I'm the type of person that I need people around me that are good. Because when I get to creative, I need someone to watch the business, and when I get in business mode, there isn't much else going on. There isn't any creation happening. I'm one or the other, right? Whereas you get someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whatever, they seem to be able to handle both of those things at once.
Okay, so in the upcoming weeks, one of the things that excites me is we're going to be talking about some law questions and issues about law. And I was thinking, when we had talked about it earlier, and I was thinking about sexual harassment, and it takes me back as I help out in the community. I substitute teach a few days a week. The kids love me, and there's a lot of good looking young teachers. And I look, when I grew and went to school, like we didn't have any good looking teachers. We had like Ms. Rizzo, who had like the black bouffant haircut and like the polyester dress, and she smelled like Aquanet, and she wore orthopedic shoes. And basically, that candy that falls into the couch and gets lint on it. That's what she smelled like too. I mean, so she was gross. And I had Mrs. Jepson who had real big feet. But now there's these cute teachers, and I swear to God, it's like every other week you see how some high school teacher or whatever has sex with a student. Now that's not sexual harassment. That's statutory rape, right? Or that cannot be both.
I'm not criminal law attorney, but yes, I would say that that's statutory rape.
Because we hear a lot about sexual harassment. What constitutes sexual harassment?
There's lots of things that can constitute sexual harassment. The easiest one in what I do is quid pro quo sexual harassment. This for that, right? So, hey, you want that raise? You know, then you're going to have to do certain things for it. The interesting thing about quid pro quo sexual harassment is that I see most of quid pro quo sexual harassment is not the lurching, evil business owner that's like, hey, young hot secretary, I'll give you an extra dollar an hour if you show me your toes. It just never really is like that. It's more like the supervisor was dating the girl that, worked in accounting. Now they've broken up and she's claiming that he's sexually harassing her and saying that if she wants to keep her job or whatever else, that she has to keep having sex with him. Those are usually the types of accusations that I see. It's never as straightforward as give me sex and, I'll give you money, right? Where you do find that, which is interesting, and I just did another video on it because they're having problems with that in Canada now. Quid pro quo in landlord tenant or in landlord tenant relationships. So the interesting thing is it's so hard to evict a tenant. And I think that's what's driving this stuff. It's so hard to evict a tenant. It's almost like, well, why don't you give me something for the rent is kind of what I think is happening. And I'm not 100% sure yet. And of course, most people don't think of landlords as business owners, but they are. They have this asset that's a business, right? And so sometimes it's a owner landlord, right? But sometimes it's a owner that has a manager, right? And that's where I usually see it is in the context of the manager. So that's straight quid pro quo sexual harassment. That's, hey, I'll give you a reduction on the rent, or I'll let you stay here for another month, or whatever it is in exchange for sex. And in bad economies, I seem to get a lot of that sort of business. In good economies, not so much. The other thing I'm noticing with that specific issue is that the way the laws are, and as hard as it is to evict people, I'm starting to see a lot more of that. It's people that are in the eviction process, or something's going on around eviction, and so it ends up being illegal. That relationship's illegal. And by the way, what people don't understand is in employment relationships, that half that I was talking about with sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation, all that, those are FEHA claims, right? In landlord-tenant relationships, those are also FEHA claims.
So in these sexual harassment suits, because everyone has that, as you said, we have the idea of the leering person, like, oh, like the old restaurant manager who's massaging their girl. Oh yeah, yeah, I'll give you a better shift if you go in the back, in the back of me, we do whippets and we get naked. With that, I mean, because there's that view on it, for you, are they a challenge to defend? Are they particularly challenging to defend because people already have an idea? We see them on the TV shows, and they never sit there and go, "Hey, here's a night." I mean, look at Mr. Roper on Three's Company used to be like Jack with the bell. I mean, this sort of sex harassment because he's insinuating he was gay, but it's so people have that idea of the Mr. Roper thing. But are they hard for you to defend when someone's suing your client for sexual harassment?
No, I mean, they're actually pretty easy to defend because there's only really two possibilities. Either you didn't sexually harass or you did sexually harass, right? And if you did sexually harass, hey, let's get rid of this. Let's pay some money, get rid of it, before this gets much worse. And the press gets a hold of it if you're big enough, or, you're standing in front of a jury and your wife is divorcing you. Or if you didn't do it, usually there's pretty good evidence that you didn't do it. Because remember, these are like the he said, she said stuff. So I had one in particular that's interesting. And I, can't say names, and I'll change a little bit of the facts just so it's not out there. But what you were talking about with social media and everybody putting stuff on social media, one of the first things we do is go to the person's social media that making the accusations of sexual harassment. And more often than not, we find some pretty good stuff, right? Even if your client doesn't admit it, you can kind of tell when it's sexual harassment, real sexual harassment, or something different. So I had this particular one where I knew it wasn't sexual harassment. I know the guy, and anybody can have a weak moment or whatever, but he just isn't that guy. Just knew him well enough, had done a lot of wage and hour stuff for him, just knew who the guy was. The girl says that he took her on a company trip and then sexually harassed her. Gave the dates, the times, all of that. The interesting thing is when we looked at her social media, she was bragging about the hotel room she was staying in. And it was right around the time and date that she claimed it was happening, and you could see the reflection in the window. She was dressed scantily, and there was a guy that was taking those photos, and you could see by the stature of the guy that he wasn't my client, right? So social media really gives a lot away, and people just aren't smart enough, or maybe it's just the way things are these days, like you said, where they put everything online. And so you can really look and defend these things. There's always some evidence, right? There's always some evidence. Even with clients that did, I mean, it is a good sexual harassment claim, but remember, it has to be unwanted, right? So I had one where there was an interaction in a conference room, and there was, a sexual act, a Bill Clinton type of sexual act in the conference room, and if it's consensual, it's not sexual harassment. So it was pretty easy to take the timestamps and the history of what happened and the communications between them and see that it was consensual and not sexual harassment. So of course he still had to spend a lot of money to fight it to prove it, uh, but at the end of the day, it wasn't clear cut sexual harassment. So my advice always is keep your sex life out of the workplace. There just is no reason to date someone that works for you, someone that you work with. There's just no reason. There's especially LA. I mean, LA has, I mean, a ton of interesting, beautiful women that you can choose from if you're an entrepreneur. So especially the farther east you go.
Exactly. So, what can the viewers look forward to in the next few weeks? Because you're going to be doing interviews with friends. I'm just going to be the sidekick. I'm going to be the hype man. I think I'm going to dress up like Flavor Flav. I'm going to put instead of a clock, I'm put one of those egg timers around my neck, and I'll be like the white Flavor Flav. That's what I'll be. I'll be like, yo yo yo. Here's John Boy Fagerholm, and it will get ratings, or people will go, "Who's this asshole?" Me. I mean, so what can we expect in the next few weeks?
Well, my thoughts are that, of course, stories about lawsuits and certain things that have happened in the context of business, but also what really interests me is like I was saying, the stories about these businesses. It's really interesting to hear what people do and for a living and what businesses they've started, how they started it, and what happens within the business. It's all pure entertainment to me, and I think the audience will also enjoy hearing all this stuff.
Now, how can people get in touch with you? And if they have a question about the show, or maybe, if someone wants to ask your advice, because I think it's always good. People don't know where to go. And they always say, what's good about surrounding yourself with a good network. If you have a question, you can ask someone. Sometimes that leads to business for the entrepreneur, the owner. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. My website is californiaemployerattorney.com. You can message me on that. I will put a caveat on that, which is I'm always happy to speak to entrepreneurs, especially. But if I just spoke to everyone that wanted to speak, I would never get any work done. So really, I only like to take or give free consultations to people that have an actual problem, right? And usually it's, hey, the government contacted me and said I'm doing something wrong, or a lawyer wrote me a letter and said I'm doing something wrong, or someone is suing me. I've received a lawsuit. Like those are people that will get a phone call back from me. I'm here to help people that have an actual problem.
All right. Well, this is great. And people, if you want to get in touch with me, go to coopertalk.net. It's my other podcast. I have over 1,050 episodes. In fact, I just interviewed Dizzy Reed, who's the keyboardist with Guns N' Roses. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's been with them. Him and Axel. Axel's the only person who's been in the band longer. And please, check us out on all the platforms, Spotify, iTunes, all of them. And John, any closing words for today? Because you're going to be taking over this interviewing next week. I'm just going to be hanging out, helping out. I'm going to be like the errand boy.
I guess my closing words would be, first of all, thank you for any of those people out there that watch this, and I hope that we can create podcasts that people are interested in. And both Steve and I are here to create good content for all of you. So we hope that you'll check in with us every couple of weeks.
And don't forget to subscribe, people. Anyway, John, close it out. You're the man.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.